our top story this morning, I want to talk about the CDC mask mandates. And so a muddled message coming out of Washington, an infuriating message coming out of Washington. So get ready to bust out your face masks again, everyone, because the freak show over at the CDC can't figure out what the heck they're doing. Sales of face masks, by the way, just surged. Sales of face masks surged about 24% over the past week. See, when the CDC says something, people respond. So the CDC says we're going to have mask mandates now, even for the vaccinated. So Google searches, surged as well. Sales of face masks surged 24% after the CDC issued this new guidance.
Are we still good with toilet paper, or is that surged too?
I'm sure they'll mention that soon. Then they'll sell that, sell out of toilet paper. But right now it's just masks. So Google searches exploded. And now they want vaccinated people to wear masks indoor at COVID hotspots. Masks indoors if you're vaccinated in COVID hotspots. In my view, this creates confusion. It's going to stop vulnerable people. By the way, the whole reason we have the vaccine is for vulnerable people to be protected, right? And it's worked. Vulnerable people getting the vaccine. Now, I'm sick and tired of seeing video after video of a person who's in a vulnerable population, like elderly and overweight, right? Elderly or overweight, and on their deathbed, saying that I waited too long. I waited too long to get the vaccine. I'm sick and tired of seeing it. And now the people that were sort of on the fence about it and are in that vulnerable population and could be prevented from getting sick, going into the ICU, now maybe they won't, because they'll say, well, why should I get a vaccine if I'm going to still have to wear a mask? It doesn't make sense. And that's the complete blame of the CDC and the Biden administration for this muddled message. And it is a muddled message. I mean, there's no other way to say this. And we know that the entire point of getting the vaccine, of course, was to prevent this vulnerable population from getting sick, as Glenn Greenwald put so perfectly. Glenn Greenwald, great reporter, said, worth reading this New York Times op-ed about COVID, vaccines, and masks. As he points out, it was always known that there'd be a breakthrough infection with the vaccines. Always known that. The goal was to render it less harmful, and that's working. Nothing has changed. And then in the opinion piece, it says, hospitals are relatively clear of COVID-19 now. Few deaths are occurring. People may still be worried, and some may be masking, but much of their panic is that the stuffy nose they woke up with may be COVID-19. The success of the vaccines has long been predicated on preventing severe illness, which they do, rather than on preventing any infection. So yes, there may be infections, but they prevent the severe illness. And so my fear with this new mask mandate is that now you're going to have confusion. And the vulnerable population, whom the vaccine was meant to protect, is going to be unsure, unsettled, Google searching for mask information and what they're going to do. And now I'm not going to get vaccinated because I still need to wear a mask, etc.
Well, and this message basically is on the side of people who don't want to get vaccinated. You just basically made their position for them.
Right. Yeah. So people who don't want to get vaccinated, you're basically solidifying that. And that's up to you. We're in a free country, right? If you don't want to get vaccinated and you're in a vulnerable population and you want to risk your health, that's totally on you. Totally on you, right? Just like I feel like, hey, you want to do drugs? You want to, get tattoos? You want to do whatever you want to do. You want to get those things in your ears, like guys get what they get, the big, the earring things, that hang down. Like, that's you. You can do that. You're not hurting, that's what you want to do for your own health. If you're in a vulnerable population and you don't want to get a vaccine, that's on you. But the people that now are hesitant about it, sitting there on the fence, are going to be less inclined to get the vaccine because of this new mask mandate. And it's crazy because President Biden literally lied right to a reporter's face yesterday. Proving you on this show that I don't pull any punches. I'm not a Democrat. I'm not a Republican. I'm an independent. If you lie, we're going to call you out about it. So President Biden yesterday, right to a reporter as he's walking away at a press conference, answers this question and lies right to this reporter's face.
Mr. President, you said if you are fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask. And it seems I haven't said
you're fully vaccinated in an area where we do
sound like a vaccine was the ticket to losing the mask forever. And
that is true at the time, because I thought there were people who were going to understand that getting vaccinated made a gigantic difference. And what happened was, a new variant came along, they didn't get vaccinated, it was spread more rapidly, and more people were getting sick. That's the difference.
There's no difference. So I didn't say that. I didn't say that at all. Oh yeah? Here's your tweet, Mr. President. Folks, if you're fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask. This was May. If you're not vaccinated yet, go to vaccines.gov to find a shot and mask up until you're fully vaccinated. Folks, if you're fully vaccinated, you no longer need to wear a mask. I repeat. Okay.
Come on, man.
Sorry, Joe. Gotta call it out, man. Gotta call it out. And
I think that's the biggest problem, because this message has been mixed from the very beginning. You know, when you had the very beginning of the pandemic, when it just started, and you had, okay, my button's not working. You had Dr. Fauci saying, don't wear a mask. Actually, if you wear a mask, you look ridiculous. Like, it doesn't do anything. And then it's like, okay, now you got to wear masks. And it's just been all over the place. So, and the CDC's been back and forth. The WHO, we won't even get into how illegitimate that organization is, but those are what Google and Facebook and everybody has used for, this is where you go to get the information, the factual information. But it's been back and forth. It's changed. They, at the beginning, they had data on the CDC website that said masks worked and that they didn't. Both,
right.
Both statements.
And so what's the truth on that? I mean, again, we come back to the data on vaccinations. The data shows that they are working. They are working actually tremendously well. So let's get in, but you know, there's been a lot of spin in the media about, okay, well, some of these people who have been getting sick have been vaccinated. And I thought this is a great assessment of this data. So let's cut through the smoke. Let's go specifically and talk about how well these vaccines are working right now. And this is a good breakdown of this data. And the data shows that vaccines do reduce the risk of death. Okay, that's the bottom line. They do reduce the risk of death. And this is a good summation of this data by this British doctor.
Statistics, certainly scary on the surface. And it comes in this table from Public Health England, looking at who's got the Delta variant and what's happened to them later on. And I'll just circle it. You can see it there. Look, of those who've received 2 doses of the vaccination, 224 died. In fact, actually, if you look across those who have been vaccinated, 1 or 2 doses, the majority of those deaths were people who were vaccinated, which raises a question. Are the vaccines working? What's going wrong here? Well, it's worth just bearing in mind 2 things here, because actually these numbers aren't quite as scary as they look at first.
Yeah, so when you actually dive into the data, which we're going to do in a second here, and he's going to dive into this, you can spin it that way, right? You can say, wow, so all these people are dying because they're vaccinated. What's going on here? Well, he explains.
First thing is that even though these vaccines should reduce the risk of death, they don't eliminate it. Now, these bars here show you your mortality risk, so the risk of getting the disease and dying by age group, from youngest to oldest. And you can see, obviously, the oldest, that 90-year-old group, is very high indeed. I'll just put that into a logarithmic scale so you can see the bottom end as well. And let's just kind of go through this. So 90-year-olds up there, pre-vaccination. 60-year-olds, for instance, pre-vaccination, are down there. But if we reduce those bars in line with what those pharmaceutical companies say they should be reduced by, that they go down, the risk of dying across the piece goes down. But even so, even if they're working supposedly as they should do, the risk for a 90-year-old is still in line with a 60-year-old pre-vaccination. So it's not eliminating it, but it is reducing it. Second thing is this. Just look at how many people have been vaccinated of that pool that we're talking about. So these are people who have got Delta. You can see that about 85% or so were vaccinated. So that's most of your sample pool. And then when you look at other things like hospitalizations, those blue bars, the blue bit of the bar is bigger than the red bit. But now break it down. Look at how many of those people who were vaccinated went on to hospital. It's about 3.5%. Now look at how much of the red bit, so those who are unvaccinated, were hospitalized, 8.4%. You see, there's a difference, a kind of difference in likelihood. 2.4 times more hospitalizations per case among those who are unvaccinated, and yet the sheer number of those who are hospitalized having been vaccinated is higher. Similar thing when we look at deaths as well. So the same thing again, we start with total number of cases, then we look at the number of deaths, and then we look at how many deaths per case. And for vaccinated people, it's 2% of those who were tested positive for Delta went on to die. For unvaccinated, it's 5.6% of those who got the disease went on to die. So a higher proportion again, 2.8 times more deaths per case. And yet the sheer number of those who are vaccinated who went on to die was greater than the number who were unvaccinated. Just underlines that simple numbers on their own don't tell the full story.
Interesting. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that in the chat below. And what about the masks?
Well, and one thing they never cover in any of these stats, like you don't see them talking about adverse effects or deaths from the actual vaccine. Like they never, ever, ever talk about those numbers, you know, to add that to the total pool. Like that should be part of this conversation, in my opinion.
Yeah. I mean, we should, like, adverse effects of getting the vaccine. We should absolutely have that as part of the data point. Absolutely. Like we do in other vaccines. And so if we're going to go out there and spin this yarn about CDC and the mask mandate, should we also not have information about, you know, okay, well, do we have enough data now to say, like, you may end up getting like an inflamed arm? I've had a couple of friends that got like the shot and they had like the Moderna shot and they had like an inflamed arm. I had no effects at all when I got the J&J shot, nothing at all. All my family got the shot. They're all fine. They had no issues at all. So, I mean, I guess it's going to be different for every person else. You get a shingles shot, you're laid up for a week. You get, get all kinds of different vaccines, and it affects people differently. Meningitis shot, the list goes on. So, all of those things are important to know. I mean, again, information is power, right? We should want to know these pieces of information, not just ignore them.
And the only way that when you're doing things like this, the only way like data appears, like an average appears, like actual stats that you can do, you need all the numbers. You have to take all the data. If you're taking your pick data, like, okay, where can we find the numbers that we want to put out there? Okay, well, we can do it this way, but let's not talk about the adverse effects. It's the same thing as, you know, when we were in the Iraq war and stuff, they made a choice on the news networks, like, let's not show caskets, let's not show bodies. We don't want the American people to know what's happening for real. So it's like they hide these numbers on purpose because they don't want you to think that the vaccine is dangerous. But you should be informed. Like it's an informed decision. Because if people could make an informed decision, say, okay, you know, this is my percentage of a chance that I'm going to get an adverse reaction from the vaccine. Okay, if I know that stat, I go into it knowing that. But it's not fair that I go into it thinking that, it's totally fine. And then my life is ruined because of something, because I didn't get all the data.
Well, and then they do a big media campaign on top of it. You know, they do a big propaganda media campaign to try to get, tell you that it's all safe and everything. And they don't tell you, maybe in that same media campaign, they should say, these are some of the, hey, we have regulations for all of the pharmaceuticals that are on television, right? This drug may cause bleeding, internal bleeding, blah, blah, blah. In some cases, death. You know, I mean, those are literally pharmaceutical ads on television, right? In the United States. We hear them regularly. All you need to do is turn on your evening news and you'll see 30 of them tonight, for different drugs. And they're going to have their disclaimer, and in rare cases, people may become paralyzed. Their kidneys may fail. They might lose their eyesight, blah, blah, blah. In all medications, right? But, mainstream media, they don't want to talk about this. And I don't know. I don't know where this comes down. This mask mandate comes down. It's like part of the liberal elite that are trying to push this. Ted Cruz thinks that this is all politics. I think Ted Cruz is a total slimeball. But is he right here? Let's listen to what he said yesterday on the floor of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I call up Cruz First Degree 2. This is an amendment that would prohibit U.S. participation in the creation of a vaccine passport. And let me say, I think there are a lot of Texans, I think there are a lot of Americans across the country that are very frustrated at the government responses to COVID-19. And I think the decision yesterday by the CDC to reverse its guidance and to mandate masks for vaccinated people is the kind of decision that is infuriating people across this country. I believe the CDC's decision yesterday was politics.
So it says, Spickle Thinker says, "Oh, Cruz, please make it stop." Yeah, I can't stand the guy. But is he right here? I mean, is what the CDC did yesterday Politics. There's no other reason for it. There's
It's
no other
all
reason.
politics. It's all been completely politicized, which is why we can't. It's why people are freaking out in the chat. You have people that are like saying they're telling the government, leave my body alone. I don't like. There's this whole campaign about the abortion argument. Stay out of my body, right? But like in this case, it's so politicized that people cannot handle people that have different information, who have gone outside of the mainstream to read articles, to watch videos, to listen to scientists, to listen to other doctors' opinions, and actually look at their data and have a different opinion. It's so politicized, and that's the thing. The CDC, when it was Trump, it was a completely different message than now that it's Biden. So they're a political organization. They are a government organization. So how would they not be politicized? Exactly.
Yeah. Sorry, Joe. We got to tell the truth here. That's what we're doing. And, look, how does the CDC, literally a week and a half ago, tell us all that if you're vaccinated, you have nothing, you don't have to wear a mask. How do we go from that, like a week and a half ago, to this new guidance? For what reason? Hospitals are not overrun by people who are dying from COVID. We're seeing a surge in cases among those people who haven't been vaccinated. So what's going on here? Here's Rachel Maddow. This was on Rachel Maddow's show. Watch this. This is the head of the CDC.
Once you are fully vaccinated, 2 weeks after your last dose, you can shed your mask.
Great.
You can shed your mask once you're fully vaccinated. Joining us now on this very big day is CDC Director Dr. Rochelle Walensky. Dr. Walensky, it's a real pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thanks for making the time to be here.
My pleasure. Good evening, Rachel.
So I have a lot of feelings about this announcement, if I can just speak in personal terms. When you said today in that briefing, we have all longed for this moment, like my heart leapt into my throat. It's true. And it is such great news after all this time. And at the same time, I am very nervous about what you said today. It is hard for me to imagine myself waltzing into the Stop and Shop tomorrow morning and not wearing a mask. I just feel like I'm not wired that way anymore. And it still feels risky. So again, forgive me for speaking in personal terms, and I don't mean to be too blunt about this, but how sure are you? Because this feels like a really big change.
We're sure. There's an extraordinary amount of evidence now that demonstrates the vaccines are working in the real world, in cohort studies, in care facilities, in across all states, that these vaccines are working the way they worked in the clinical trials. Importantly, there's also new data, just even in the last 2 weeks, that demonstrates these vaccines are working in against the variants that we have circulating here in the United States, and also data has emerged that has demonstrated that if you are vaccinated, you are not likely to asymptomatically shed the virus and give it to others. So it is this coalescing of all the evidence now that tells us really it is safe to take.
All right. Well, it's all safe now. This was a week ago. And then a week later, now it's all changed. And now mask mandates. And, Disney, Apple stores, and others saying, you come here, you're going to, even after the mandates are up, it's going to be permanent masks now. Here you go, just like permanent masks. Thanks for subscribing to the channel. You can also become a channel member by going to morninginvest.com/join, where you can stick it to the mainstream media and support independent journalism. We're able to bring you the stories that you won't see on any of the major billionaire-backed networks. Thanks so much. We'll see you next time, everyone.